Ready to go.
Good evening and welcome to the regular meeting of the Worcester City Council held by Zoom video conferencing and YouTube this Monday, April 19th, 2021. It's after 7:30 p.m. The next meeting will be on Monday, May 3rd, 2021 at 7:30 p.m. If you would, please, Mr. Paulo, please call the roll.
Mr. Ansel,
Here.
Mr. Bostancic. Oh, he went away and didn't come back yet, right?
Right.
He should have come back. There we go. Got him.
You have him now?
Yes.
Bill Bostancic?
Yes.
Okay.
I
Mr.
can't get my video to go.
Mr. Cavan?
Here.
Mr. Myers?
Here.
Mr. Sanders?
Here.
Mr. Silvestri?
Here.
And Ms. Warden?
Here.
Well, we're all here, so we do have a quorum. The agenda will remain as presented, and at this time, I'd ask you to stand and join the rest of the City Council in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, one and all. Okay, item 2 of the agenda is approval of the minutes of the April 5th meeting, 2021. I'll entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
A motion by Mr. Silvestri to approve the minutes of April 5, 2021. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Ansel. All in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. The minutes of April 5, 2021 are approved. Well, welcome, Mayor. We had quite an extensive presentation by your staff as to the first quarter of 2021 here in the city of Worcester, and things are looking promising. Hopefully we keep on that roll. So welcome, and I turn the meeting over to you, sir.
All right. Thank you, President Bidendyke and City Council members. Nice to see everyone here this evening and all of our guests also. I'd like to start with saying thanks to Andre and Joel and our city managers for presenting tonight's first quarter 2021 financial report and the 2020 operations update at the 6:30 meeting this evening. It's always amazing to me what our team achieves throughout each year. So nice job to all. Want to start out with good news. Things are starting to come back in our community. The net income tax collections 13.5% higher than the first quarter of 2020 at 5% more than budgeted. General fund revenues were 4.1% over budget and expenditures were 3.6% under budget. Building permits up in the first quarter 2021, 48.8 million versus 14.2 million in 2020. Bed tax collection, the first quarter coming back, 21 is slightly less than 20, but 20 had a better start into it, where 2021 we're still fighting the COVID piece. Lastly, our finance team received another honor on April 16th, being called with the 40th Excellence in Reporting for our comprehensive annual financial report. So 4 decades of receiving this honor. So very well done for our city finance team, and congratulations. All business for tonight's city council meeting are important, but I'd like to weigh in on 3 specific pieces of legislation. Ordinance 2021-18, Housing Development for Worcester. Housing for our city is and has been important. Ordinance 2021-18 will allow Lemon Development to build a 141 unit planned development on 21.87 acres off Melrose Drive. It received a unanimous vote of approval at the city's planning commission on April 1st. Lemon Development has tried to address the neighbors' concerns with single-family homes along like properties. Emergency access only for connection to a second access point, larger setbacks from property lines, and reduced number of units. They have exhibited a professional product with their Danbury facility on Portage Road, built approximately 8 years ago, and their detached units added approximately 5 years ago. All of our planning, development, and engineering teams have weighed in to dispel the neighbors' concerns with current laws and requirements that the development will be required to meet. I believe this development will help our city with many new housing units with little to no detriment to the neighbors or the area. And I urge your approval, City Council members, of this planned development. Second is Resolution 2021-23, territory transfer with the schools. This is for the 5L Farm property that the city purchased. Green Local School District and Wooster City Schools have been working together to bring about an agreement. We believe this will be supported by each respective school board of education at their respective meetings next week. This legislation will allow me to enter into an agreement that is approved by both school districts, keeping the forward momentum happening with interest in our innovation park. Again, I urge council's approval of this legislation. And lastly, Resolution 2021-24, purchase of land adjacent to Worcester Community Hospital. As discussed with city council members, this land abuts the main campus of Worcester Community Hospital. This purchase consists of 2 parcels which have recently been made available for purchase. This will enhance the space available for future expansions of Worcester Community Hospital and will be an asset for the hospital and the city. Again, I urge council's approval of this legislation. Thank you for your consideration of all the important pieces of legislation on your agenda this evening, and our administrative team are here to help in any of the discussions or in any way we can. So with that, President Buitendijk, I'll turn it back over to you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Petitions, we have none this evening. Communications from the public, Mr. Scovelli. A lot of people are here to speak at the public hearing on the Melrose rezoning.
They are. President Bidek, we have nothing from online, and I believe most of the people here that are here to speak will be doing so during the public hearing.
Okay, that's good enough. So speaking of the public hearing, why don't we go ahead and have the public hearing first, and then we can have committee reports. So Mr. Sanders, I am going to presume, being chairperson of Laws and Ordinance, you will be handling the public hearing on the rezoning.
I will, Mr. President, with the assistance of Mr. Scovelli, since he has the technical controls, if you will, for the meeting this evening.
Well, I turn the floor over to you and to your techno wizard.
Thank you very much. Yes, I would like to go ahead and open up the we'll open up the public hearing related to the rezoning application, and I believe I would reach out to Mr. Dutton to kind of give us an overview of the situation related to this, sir.
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Sanders. Yeah, I just want to go over the background of the site a little bit, what a plan development zoning is, and the criteria you're asked to review the application with. In 2019, the site received an application for a preliminary subdivision plat for a 62-unit detached single-family development. This was approved by the Planning Commission, but was not built due to other reasons. In January of this year, the current applicant requested a rezoning of R3 for the property. The Planning Commission did not recommend approval of the application, and the application chose not to proceed to City Council. The applicant then approached staff with a development containing a mix of detached single-family homes and attached single-family homes. This is unique, and the mix is not permitted in any standard zoning district. So staff recommended the applicant apply for a planned development zoning. So a typical rezoning considers only the change of the official zoning map. It's literally changing that map from one color, one zoning district to another. Any additional plans or items included in the application are completely informational. If that standard rezoning request is approved, a development plan must follow the requirements of that standard new zoning district. With the plan development, Council and Planning Commission are considering not only the zoning, but a preliminary development plan and a development text. These are both being reviewed for approval. This requires far more information than a typical rezoning and entails considerable initial planning and upfront costs by the applicant. Exceptions to the zoning standards are expected and are the basis of a plan development. If the plan development rezoning and plan and text are approved, then development on site must follow them in the future final development plan applications. We currently have 4 plan developments in the city, only one of which was completed anywhere near recently. That's Tartan Ridge. It was about 2010 that was approved. That's on the west side of Akron Road. That includes detached single-family homes on a gated drive with a private drive, which is surrounded by R1. There are 3 older plan developments which were approved under older zoning regulations in the 70s and 80s. Miller Lakes is on the west side of Burbank Road, north of the intersection of Cleveland. It includes detached single-family homes and multifamily residential, and it's surrounded by R1. Townsview Place is off of Robinson Road. That's north of Seacrest and south of US 30. It includes attached single-family homes and is adjacent to R2 and CF, which is community facilities. And finally, Yorkshire Estates is off of Cleveland Road, north of Highland on the west side of Cleveland Road. It also has attached single-family units and is surrounded by R1. So the application is subject to the zoning map amendment criteria found in sections 1105.03E1. Those are the general review criteria, and 1111.06A. Those are the review criteria for a plan development. These sections have been provided to council members in the reading packet. Based on these review criteria, on April 1st, the Planning Commission unanimously voted to recommend approval. In addition, Planning Division staff also recommends approval and finds the plan development zoning is consistent with the Planning and Zoning Code's intent and provides a preliminary development plan and development text sensitive to the unique characteristics of the site and surrounding area. The proposed plan development zoning addresses changing conditions in the area, will provide housing options to meet documented demand in the Wooster area. The application is consistent with aspects and objectives of the comprehensive plan, and the proposed zoning is compatible with the area and would not result in adverse effects. So that's really what I have for kind of an overview and specifically what a plan development is, and I'm happy to answer any questions now or throughout the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Dutton, for that explanation. Mr. Scully, is there, you and I have talked briefly, but at this point, do you have a procedure which you feel is best for us to follow this evening?
I do, and Mr. Sanders, if you would want to go ahead and just designate me as hearing officer, I'll go ahead and then I'll announce the how we're going to move forward, and we can go from there.
I will designate you, sir.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Sanders. Everyone, I know there's a lot of people here tonight. I know everybody has a lot of opinions and would like to share those opinions and has some very strong feelings either for and against this project. Based upon that, we want to make sure that we handle this efficiently and give everybody the chance to speak without being interrupted or without having to talk over anyone or compete for time. So in so doing, what we're going to do is we're first going to listen to witnesses who are in favor of the project and the rezoning. Then in the second thing we're going to do is listen to people who are against the rezoning. Those people who are against the rezoning, when they're listening to the people in favor of the rezoning, should think about questions you may wish to ask the witnesses in favor. At the end of your statements, you will be able to list those questions. I will then turn it over to the witnesses you would like to answer those questions, and they will have an opportunity to answer them. You will be able to ask follow-up questions if you are against the rezoning, limited only to what has been said by the witnesses who answered your questions. No other topics will be able to be talked about once they have answered your questions. At that point, everyone who is against will be done, and the people who are in favor will be able to ask questions of the witnesses who were against, if they have any. Those people against will answer those questions, and follow-ups from the people in favor can also be asked at that time. Again, limited to what was said by the people who are against. Once we are finished with that, we'll turn it over to people who are online, who want to ask questions from YouTube. So without any further ado, I believe, Mr. Dutton, you've already gone through the introduction and how you believe that the criteria have been met. So I think the next witness that we were planning to have testify was Jonathan Millay. Mr. Millay, if you could go ahead for us, please.
Thank you, Mr. Scavelli. And thank you, everybody, this evening. We just wanted to share some information with regard to this proposal and its impacts on economic development for our community. We earlier provided a memo to Worcester City Council that outlines some of the highlights of how this particular proposal meets a lot of our economic development and community development aspirations. Specifically with a project of this scale, it's commonly involved for our office to be involved if for no other reason than to provide general information and help provide a connection to resources. Very often we'll take a look at some of the broader impacts if it's a particularly large project. And this particular effort, which proposes 141 units, is actually a pretty sizable injection of new housing that we've seen in many, many years. So I'd like to speak just very briefly on the proposal itself. As Mr. Dutton explained, there was an earlier iteration of this project. And this newer version that came back was something where our office had the opportunity to speak with the developer who requested information on how they would be able to
Welcome to the regular meeting of the Wooster.
how they would be able to provide a application that would be more harmonious with the neighborhood. And to that end, they've produced a plan that today reduces the density 7% from what was there prior. The recommendation that we had heard from earlier conversations was to have a provision of single family housing, which this project has 28 in there. Going forward, there's additional setback space, and overall, one of the bigger elements of this is it provides an opportunity to have this area developed and maintain emergency access only without public through traffic on DeMille Lane, which is something that has been a concern in this area going back for a few years now. That's something very unique that would be very, very difficult to achieve if it were to develop with the current zoning, because of how regulations are set up and because of the need for having the access and road specifications. It would pretty much be ensured in most cases that you would have, if that area were to fully develop as R1 through traffic on DeMille Lane. So this was able to match a lot of goals. On housing in general, housing is something that we have been examining for a very long time. It is gravely needed in our community. Most apartments that we see, specifically those that get into 2 bedrooms or more, generally have wait lists. That's at the $1,100 to $1,300 mark per month. Right now, that would be getting on a waiting list and hoping that something opens up. That has been very discouraging for employers and their employees that they're hiring, specifically those who they're hiring in from out of the area. Those employees have that experience of coming to commute, but not finding affordable housing in the local area, or housing that they can afford commensurate with their pay. Simply again because they're going to be waitlisted due to the lack of housing. That in some cases we've heard has led employers or has led employees to find other jobs, not necessarily higher paying, closer to where they already were, because they have a place where they're able to live there, not being able to find housing here. Housing's needed on all strata. We need apartment housing to get people here, and we need single family housing to keep people here once they get here. So those are two critical elements that we need. Our overall economic health with this issue, Worcester has been doing fantastic in the economic development sphere. We've seen our job market grow. We have seen, and part of the reason why we do have our housing crunch is a result of that. However, we are now also at a point where our experience in this office has been that we have lost jobs in Worcester, and we have lost real estate projects that would have occurred here to other nearby communities where there is more of a housing supply and a perception of additional housing growth. And that is something that has been very, it's something that's quite devastating on the economic development front. So a project like this helps to provide a community the opportunity to have a sizable injection of new housing that will hopefully prove to other developers that we do have a very strong market. And I'll leave with one final point, and that is that typically one of the things that we hear from developers very frequently is that there are not a lot of good data points. Despite all the information we have with census data, a lot of developers are looking to a successful development, something of this magnitude, to succeed. We feel exceptionally confident that it'll be immensely successful if to come to fruition, before they will invest in making the investments required for additional apartments, additional single family, buying land, securing land, developing the infrastructure to make that happen. To that end, I would like to just point out and make a couple introductions to some folks who are joining us this evening who have expressed a strong interest in housing, folks that we have gone to try to learn more on what we can do as a community to help strengthen our community and economic development. First would be Mr. Andrew Dix. He's the immediate past chair of the Wayne Economic Development Council, a nonprofit organization that has economic interests in our community. Also, we have Ms. Melissa Pierce. She is the president of the nonprofit Community Action Wayne Medina, a local office here based off Pittsburgh Avenue. Additionally, we have Mr. Tim Swift, who is from the Wooster Brush Company. Who's here earlier in the year as they're embarking upon building the third largest building by footprint in the city of Worcester. Also, Mr. Scott Boyes, he is the Chief Financial Officer for the Worcester Community Hospital, which is a 6-time IBM Watson award-winning hospital. Mr. Tom Marting from Gojo Industries, who has manages actually the largest building that we have in the city of Worcester. And additionally, Mr. Kevin Weldy, who is the president of Tech4 USA, whose technology is utilized throughout the global economy, who has been working very hard through the years to develop new technologies and right here in Worcester and share them with our global community. These folks are exceptionally well versed when it comes to guiding and making strategic investments, and this group has also provided us information on the need for housing in order to strengthen our community if we are going to be able to continue making the innovations that we do that make our community a great quality place to live and work, and a great quality place that has a global impact. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Malay. And next, is there someone from Lemon Development that would like to speak to the legislation tonight?
Hi, yes, thank you. Patrick Mackey of Lemon Development. As Mr. Sanders indicated, we are appearing today due to our application for a zoning amendment. So we're seeking to designate the 21.87 acres located on Melrose Drive as a planned development. And as noted earlier, on April 1st, the Planning Commission held a public hearing and voted unanimously in favor of recommending the approval of the rezoning application. The submitted site plan conforms to the requirements of the PD. It offers some solutions to the concerns that were previously raised, including lowering the density, incorporating single-family detached homes, and increasing the setbacks. Additionally, the development contributes towards the goal laid out in Wooster's 2015 master plan of adding up to 240 multifamily units with varying designs, rates, and amenities. Our concept plan shows a total unit count of 141. Unit types will consist of duplex villas, 4 and 8 unit single-story apartments, 3 unit, 3-story townhomes, single-family detached homes, and a community clubhouse. Aside from the 8 unit apartments, all units will have attached garages. These are concepts and have not been finalized. Specifically, the townhomes, we included them in the concepts in the package that you have, but they're not placed on the site plan. The market conditions are going to influence our final design. The estimated rents for the units are going to range between $1,050 to $2,000 per month. Brookwood Management, which is our affiliated company, will serve as the property manager. Brookwood currently manages nearly 1,500 residential units. Stormwater, it will be retained on the property. We will follow the Ohio EPA and City of Worcester's design requirements. For the sewer, we've already discussed with the city and we'll be participating in an upgrade to the pump station. A traffic study was completed in March of 2021, and it concluded that the level of service pre-development will be maintained upon the completion of the development. No changes to the roadway network were recommended. All the roads in the community will be private. And as noted earlier, the connection to Mel Lane on the east of the property line is designated for emergency use only. Access will be controlled by safety forces. The existing storage building on the site will be available to community residents for extra storage. And we estimate that the development and construction costs for the apartments and homes is going to range from $175,000 to $250,000. Again, thank you for your time this evening, and I look forward to answering any questions regarding the plan.
At this point, are there any questions from members of council? We won't be asking that from anyone from the public right now. Is there anyone from council who has any questions for the applicant? Okay. Moving on, anyone who is here to speak in favor of the rezoning, could you please raise your hand and we will go down the list. Is there anyone who, thank you, we'll start with Mr. Marting. Mr. Marting, you are muted, so if you can unmute yourself and feel free to testify. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be back before City Council again. My name is Tom Marting. I'm here representing Gojo. I'm the Facilities, Environmental Health and Safety Director for Gojo. It has been my pleasure to be involved in the Gojo expansion in Worcester since the very beginning in 2015. And I've been part of the growth we've seen over the last 6 years to where we're now close to 700 employees on site. As we've seen that growth, we've seen more and more the challenge of getting our workforce quotas met and our workforce numbers in grow with that growth in our business. So we've seen even right now we have got many open positions online. About half of our workforce is commuting in from out of town, and we are hear from our employees and know from our experience that the housing issues and situations in Worcester are a contributing factor to the difficulty and the challenges we have with our workforce fulfillment for our plant in Worcester. So I'm here to speak in favor and urge the council to approve the Melrose housing project. We think it's the right kind of housing project with its mix of rent and single family units, the price ranges. We think it'll be an addition to the community that will help with our issues and other businesses that have issues with the job market and with fulfilling the labor market positions. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marting. Does any member of City Council have any questions for Mr. Marting? Okay, then moving on. Ms. Pierce, did you wish to address council?
Sure, thank you so much. Good evening, I'm Melissa Pierce. I'm representing Community Action Way Medina, 905 Pittsburgh Avenue here in Worcester. Community Action focuses on promoting self-sufficiency, household stability, and education for under-resourced families. In our 2020 Community Needs Survey, affordable housing was shown as the #1 need in our community. The addition of housing inventory represented by the proposed Melrose housing development will free up existing housing stock through the transition of families into this new development. Many times older housing is more affordable to the low to moderate income families that we serve. Research shows that when families have stable, decent, and accessible homes that they can afford, that they're better able to find employment, achieve economic mobility, perform better in school, and maintain improved health. Increasing access to affordable housing is the most cost-effective strategy for reducing childhood poverty. The ripple effect of expanding housing in this community fortifies stability in all sectors. And at Community Action, we believe that when our under-resourced neighbors thrive, the whole community benefits. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Pierce. Does any member of City Council have any questions for Ms. Pierce? Mr. Silvestri, what's your question for Ms. Pierce?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Scavelli. Ms. Pierce, I just wanted to follow up and see, it sounded like from your comments, would you say that the affordable housing targets that you're aiming for that would best serve the citizens that you are here to kind of aid and guide? And you talked about, you know, I'm fully aware of the ways in which you fortify our community. Would you say that any of the citizens that are in that category could afford the kind of rents that were just outlined? I know Patrick Mackey just spoke about them from Lemon Development, you know, $1,050 to $2,000 a month, $175,000 to $250,000 in construction cost. Does that serve any of your audience directly?
It would serve some of the moderately income families. However, our interest is primarily in the way the stock would open with the transition and migration into new housing stock.
Sure. In other words, maybe someone looking to make a move up would move out and free up some lower income facilities. Is that correct?
Correct. That's
okay.
right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it,
Anything
Mr.
further
Scavelli.
from Ms. Pierce? Oh, you're welcome. Thank you, Mr. Silvestri. Anything further from Ms. Pierce? No? All right. Mr. Weldy, did you wish to address council?
Yes, I did. My name is Kevin Weldy. I'm representing Tech 4 here in Worcester. I've been advocating housing for the past several years. We've struggled to find people, manufacturing associates here in town. We also have over 50% of our employees actually commute to work every day. That is a situation we cannot have long-term. I mean, they find something closer and they move closer, right? Which means they move out of town. What we've been able to see, currently we have 18 openings. We continue to have those 18 openings. We had 14 last time we talked. We're just about to put the finishing touches on a pretty significant expansion here in Worcester. And with that, we're very concerned how we would staff it, quite honestly. So we're looking for 65 to 70 new jobs, and we're 18 short already. So we really, this has been something that I have encouraged, that we expand housing in Worcester. For many years now, I've been involved in this. This is not my first discussion about this. I've had many discussions, and I do appreciate the people in the city council actually going out and trying to address that for business owners or business leaders like myself. We need to attract and retain people. Even in this past year, we all know The jobs have increased, but the job seekers have decreased. They're leaving town. They don't have a place to stay. And that's a problem that has to be resolved. We need housing in this community to retain our people. There's good jobs in Worcester, and we need to grow this economy.
Thank you, Mr. Weldy. Does any member of City Council have any questions for Mr. Weldy? All right, thank you so much, Mr. Weldy. Mr. Dix, would you like to address council?
Yes, I would. Andrew Dix, speaking on behalf of WEDC as the immediate past chair. I'd like to say that many of our largest employers and our key investors have asked WEDC to weigh in on this subject. A healthy housing inventory is vital to area businesses to continue to grow and prosper, and helping our area businesses grow and prosper is a key mission of WEDC. As Mr. Weldy just mentioned, housing has been a topic and a top initiative for a few years now for WEDC. And when I look around the screen tonight, I see that you're going to hear and have already heard from some specific members of WEDC, but I wanted to speak on behalf of our members' collective voice as you consider this issue tonight. It's certainly a key top concern, and it's impeding many businesses' growth, expansion, and prosperity. And I appreciate the time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dix. Are there any questions from City Council for Mr. Dix? All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Dix. Moving on, Mr. Boyes, would you like to address council?
Yes, I would, Mr. Scavelli. I'm Scott Boyes with Worcester Community Hospital in administration. I also serve with Mr. Dix and Mr. Weldy on the Lane Economic Development Council. And certainly we've heard and continue to hear the workforce housing needs of our manufacturing business partners. But I will also attest that the hospital in the hospital system with our 1,250 employees, a third of our workforce commutes from outside of the county, and entry-level positions or staff-level positions are always a challenge for us to maintain. And I know we compete with our business partners for some of those entry-level positions. I will say we have a physician liaison that goes out and meets with all the physician practices, including those not employed by the hospital. And we are hearing over and over the difficulty of hiring entry-level staff members. So the importance of housing in our community and freeing up the housing stock can't be overemphasized. So I'm here in support of this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boyes. Does any member of City Council have questions for Mr. Boyes? All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Boyes. Mr. Swift, would you like to address City Council?
Yes, good evening. Tim Swift representing the Wooster Brush Company. I'd like to be a little more general in my comments, if you don't mind, and thank you, City Council and guests and public. Here at Wooster Brush Company, obviously, we're not politicians. We're not qualified to be such. We're not qualified to be city planners. But there's some pretty smart people on the other end of these cameras that do just that for a living. What we are really good and qualified here at the Wooster Brush Company is making the best paint applicators in the world. And for that, we need people. And currently we have 600 great employees, but we need more. And as you all know, it's old news now that we're going to be expanding here in Worcester. And I was part of a team that was put together to go out and look at other zip codes to consider expanding in. And ultimately, we put our faith right back here in our hometown of Worcester. And so whether or not this project is the exact right one, exact right time, it's the only one I see on the table. And so if that's what helps get this more people, more employees to satisfy our customers and keep us making paintbrushes here in Worcester, Ohio, I'm all for it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Swift. Are there any questions from members of City Council for Mr. Swift? All right. Hearing none. Is there anyone else that I missed who would like to speak in favor of the rezoning tonight? I've got you on 2 different pages, so please raise your hands and leave them up if there is. Okay, well, seeing none, we're going to move on to people who want to testify against the rezoning. I'm going to just give everybody a little caveat since this will be our first time we're going to be taking questions, which we'll do from the people in favor at the end. Please give your testimony first. allowing city council members to ask you any questions that they may have. Once that is done, if you can list your questions for me and also tell me which witness you would like to address them to, and then we will have them respond. So if everybody understands that, please raise your hand if you would like to speak against the rezoning. Please raise your hand. Everybody raise your hand who wants to speak. I think, Ann, I don't see yours up, but I'm sure yours is. Okay, there we go. All right, let's start. We're going to start first with Ms. Oplanek. You are muted, so if you could unmute yourself, Ms. Oplanek, and we'll get started.
Thank you. Good evening, and we're very happy to be here in the Zoom meeting this evening. I'm part of a neighborhood, an R1 neighborhood. We've been around for about 50 years. First of all, I want to thank the business leaders and community action people who have come and presented the need for housing. We understand your need, and we are in agreement that there is a need for housing in Worcester. We, as adjacent homeowners to the property that's being discussed, still believe that this property should not be rezoned, but keep its current zoning designation of R1. It came into the city as part of the Madisonburg annexation in 1989, and it was designated an R1 neighborhood, we believe, to protect our neighborhood. This property is surrounded by R1 neighbors. There are R1 neighbors to the west, the north, the east, the south is an agricultural land. These parcel in question is requesting a PD designation. That is a vast deviation from an R1 neighborhood. If you look at the vast majority of R1 neighborhoods in the city of Worcester, they have nothing that's at all compatible with what is suggested to be developed there. We would be welcoming to an R1 neighborhood. I know that Mr. Millay suggested that maybe we couldn't close off the right-of-way street, which would leave some people, myself included, not really happy about that. But we also feel that we are losing all our neighborhood protections when we lose the protected development that the city always intended for us to have, which was R1. I would like to speak on a couple of the issues of why I would continue to think that R1 is the correct designation. The first one would be that we in the city of Worcester use our comprehensive plan as our basic guide. And as you as council members, you have to use some kind of designated criteria and basis for zoning. And our zoning foundational principles are basically about a few different subject categories. The majority of them are about compatibility, preserving neighborhoods, and protecting neighborhoods. And if you read through those of the letter that I sent to you, almost every one of the foundational principles in your comprehensive plan and my comprehensive plan suggests that our R1 designation for this property is much more reasonable than the current proposed PD plan. Ignoring what our comprehensive plan uses as its foundational principles, I think would be short-sighted on the part of the city in meeting the housing needs of the city. And it would also set a precedent for any future developments that are coming into the interior of R1 neighborhoods and developing. Second of all, I think that the review criteria as well speak to the fact that they're very, most of those, again, would speak to the fact that we would be, as an R1 neighborhood, severely changed by this neighborhood coming in. The term compatibility is continually being used by the city in their references to thinking that these two will fit together. And we can see that in every one that was discussed this evening by Mr. Dutton, all PD neighborhoods do have to have a different things met because they are not compatible with R1 neighborhoods. They have to have larger setbacks, they have to have buffering, they have to have different things done. We're just simply different places. Our R1 neighborhood is a home-owned neighborhood. The R1 that's being built in this neighborhood is rental units. They're different. Rentals are typically mobile people. They're not staying in a place too long. Usually single-family neighborhoods, you have much longer time where people stay in their homes. So really, there's a vast difference between the two. I also sent a chart that shows how different we are from each other. Anything from density to types of housing to types of neighborhoods. We have different needs that are being met. The business owners that came this evening, I appreciate them coming because it shows that the future of Worcester and their interest in the need for more housing. But if they're planning on keeping employees for long times, I would doubt that they would want to come to a rental neighborhood for a long term. I assume that they would be seeking more single family or maybe duplex, at least the home ownership opportunity. This is not being met at all by this proposed planned neighborhood. And in fact, I don't know what the city has been doing as far as meeting this drastic need that seems to be going on and on. It is also not only a need in Worcester. If anybody tries to look at purchasing a house anyplace else where people want to live, you're going to find that there is nothing on the housing market. So it's not simply a Worcester issue. It's an issue all around Wayne County, but greater Cleveland area, but just about anywhere. So we talked about the compatibility issue. We are not compatible. We are an R1 neighborhood. We've been a historic R1 neighborhood. This is a development that has to come into our interior of our neighborhood. It also, as a planned development, is a private plan development. Now, years ago when I was on city council and we were talking about development, it was quite serious matter when somebody wanted to deviate from the standards that were set down for development in the comprehensive plan. As a private development, a lot of those requirements are not going to have to be met. And it's a great concern to me that if we're asking people to move into a stable, long-term neighborhood, that their way of life and the longevity of the neighborhood that's going to be built is built in a quality way, just as we would expect an R1 neighborhood that comes into that area as well. And by allowing the developer to come in as a private developer in a private way, there are things that are going to be, I feel, substandard. There will be streets that are not built to city code as far as the development code. I assume there are no curbs and gutters at this point, as it's been a question. The pedestrian plan that is mentioned is, it looks like there's nothing in the townhouse in the home area. I don't know where people are going to walk, ride bikes. The pedestrian plan goes around a retention pond. I think that that's not safe for children. But most concerning to me, believe it or not, is the large units, the eight attached types of units. I think there are 64 apartments that there's no information on in the packet. I talked to Mr. Dutton this week about that, and I was quite concerned that it's almost half the development and we have no information. Now, I will say very much a big thank you to the developer, Lemon Developers, Mr. Winhart, the Acaperos, for thinking of the neighbors and placing some R1 rental homes, at least, contiguous to some of our backyards. I know along Smithville Western, there's still quite a large sector of 3-story townhouses that they will be looking at and hopefully buffered from. But these two large plats of very high density, 8-unit homes seem to not have any information on them. And I'm concerned about the people who are going to potentially live in those. They seem to have no garages. This is Ohio. To walk into a carport or a garage off-site, it doesn't seem safe. It doesn't seem logical to me. There's no information on their square footage. There's no drawings. The only drawing that they have that's in our packet, I believe, does not refer to the 8 units as it says it does, because it has garage. The setback between these apartment units looks like it's only 15 feet. So between your front door and the front door that is facing you, that's 15 feet. It seems to me that since they're going to be the interior to each other and back to back, they will have only windows in one side of their 4 sides of their apartment. I'm just concerned about the quality of life. If we really want to move this direction, I hope that at least this part of the plan gets a real good look at, because I think it's substandard to ask anybody to live in that type of rental unit and pay $1,000 or more. And it's not current. It's not a wise way to ask people to live without light and air circulation and space. I'm also concerned about this being a private development. The city has allowed the developer to, I'm going to say, skimp a little bit on some of the requirements and include things like some of the retention basements for open space, and the reducing the boundary lines a little bit so they can have their 30% open space. I think that at the very least, the developer should be required to come up with plain and simple 30% of open space without having to make modifications. I don't agree with the 14 or the 15-foot setback reduction. And I think that there are many parts of livability. All these businesses are asking for good places for their employees to come, places that are decent and offer a home environment, even if it's a rental environment. I mean, we've all lived in those, at least I have for many years. And I think that piece of the plan really needs a good look. So to kind of close out my argument, I want the city council members and the business owners to know that we are not against housing. We live in a neighborhood that's always been R1. We are an R1 neighborhood. So what you're asking for us to do, I hope you would ask and say that you yourselves would accept it, that if you live in an R1 neighborhood, would you accept the fact that a large 141 unit rental housing units come inside of your neighborhood, and that's compatible? We have housing values to look at. We have a lifestyle to look at. We chose to live in an R1 neighborhood, and we expected it to be preserved. We are looking at a need that needs to be met, but we're meeting it with the wrong method of doing that. There are many, 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 many places in the North End in Madisonburg of hundreds of acres of open land in higher density trafficked areas. So we ask that you reconsider and take a look at those places first. That is where a development of this type belongs, in a higher density area. This is high density. It's 141 units, surrounded by 1 acre city, single family, suburban type lots. And you're trying to intermix 2 types of areas to meet a housing need. Meeting a need, solving a problem by doing it the wrong way is not solving a problem. It's simply asking for more problems. You're setting a precedent to invade R1 neighborhoods with high density housing. And I think the city's being short-sighted in looking for a temporary fix or a placebo for our housing issues. This isn't going to solve the housing issues. These are rentals. These are not permanent homes for people to live in long-term. The city needs to look at this in a much broader way. This will be a drop in the bucket of what the housing needs need. And we would like to ask that the city council look again at our principles that are in our code. And if you read through those, well, I'm not going to take the time to do that, you'll recognize that the city expects itself to follow what it has set down as its standards. And its standards say that we are an R1 neighborhood. We expect to live in an R1 neighborhood. We expect to be represented as an R1 neighborhood. We expect our neighborhood to be preserved and protected. And we expect our R1 neighborhood to be what we have always been, good city citizens, citizens who've done the right thing for the city, citizens who've contributed, citizens who have no issue with an R1, that designation of an R1 neighborhood. But we do have an issue, at least I have an issue, my husband has an issue with this suggested high density neighborhood. Speaking of density, if anybody looks at the formula for density for a PD neighborhood, it's excessive, much higher than an R3, only inhibited here because they've allowed them, requested building some R1 homes and the open space requirement of 30%. But I do want to thank you for your hard work. I know you've been looking into things. I don't understand why there's no information in this preliminary plan concerning almost half the housing units that are being built. And I would hope that as council members, before you approved a plan, you would have an in-depth and detailed look at what is actually going to be built there. Because it looks to me as though, through reading through this, that there is nothing definitive as far as to what actually will be built.
Ms. O'Planick, I don't want to interrupt you, but
Okay.
I do believe that you've covered these points.
Gotcha.
We've gotten
All right, I've
covered
covered my points, and I have questions. Do you want me to just ask them later, or?
I'm gonna have City Council ask you any questions that they
Okay.
have, and then after that, we'll take down your questions. Okay.
That sounds good.
Is there
because we
any
might cover
members of
them that
City
way.
Council who have questions for Ms. O'Planick? Okay. If
Please,
there are none,
please ask questions.
if there are none, Ms. O'Planick, if you could you tell me if
Mr.
you
Scavelli?
Yes.
I certainly, I just wanted a couple comments about with Ms. O'Planick, please, real quick.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
One, I very much enjoyed the document you forwarded to us. It was one of the better written pieces that I've received on this topic or any other topic in the 7 years I've been on council. So thank you very much for presenting that information. Not that this is going to change anything, but the retention ponds as mandated by the Ohio EPA don't have water in them standing. It's just a pass-through pond. So as far as children walking in that area, there shouldn't be a problem.
Okay, thanks.
Just so you know. And I think that the developer can provide and answer some of your questions with regard to those other areas that you're concerned about. So I just wanted to say thank you for your input, and I appreciated your comments.
I'd like to make a comment if I could, Mr. Scavelli.
Sure, go ahead.
Ms. O'Planick, you mentioned, I forget the exact word that you used, but basically said that it would be uninhabitable to live in Ohio and not have a large yard, a sidewalk, and a garage. I would invite you to visit some of the other neighborhoods in Worcester. I live in Ward 2, and many of our neighborhoods do not have those things, and we don't find it uninhabitable at all. It certainly would be lovely to have those things for, I'm sure, many of these residents, but the older neighborhoods do not afford larger lots and garages just based on the size of the lots that the homes were built on several generations ago, which also leads me to my point of several generations ago, the city probably would not have anticipated having incredibly large country lots in the city boundaries, which we have now. So things change, progress is inevitable, and I just would like to invite you to please come down and check out neighborhoods such as Gashi Street or Lincoln Street or University Street, where some of these homes do not have the luxuries that perhaps country living might afford you.
Thank you,
I
Mr.
need to
Wood.
clarify that if that was a
Ms. O'Planick,
misconception.
Ms. O'Planick, that was not a question, that was a comment.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions for Ms. O'Planick or comments? All right, moving on. Then Ms. O'Planick, I know you have some questions from some witnesses. If you could tell me the witness and the question, we will list those and then we'll get some answers for you.
Yes, for Mr. Dutton.
Okay.
And Mr. Malay, I'm not sure who this would go to, or Mr. Montgomery. The compatibility, please explain compatibility, because I said that this development is compatible with an R1 neighborhood.
Okay, and is that your only question?
No, do you want them
Okay,
all?
yeah, give them all to me. You tell me the witness
Okay.
that you want to question and your question.
Okay, next question. What city requirements are not being met for developments, regular R1 developments
Who would you
compared
like
to
to
the
address that to?
the PD? And that would go to, I guess, Mr. Dutton, and that would be streets, curbs, gutters, sidewalks, lighting, pedestrian plan.
Okay. And next?
Question to Mr. probably the engineer. The water said that they mentioned the stormwater issue would be contained.
Ms. O'Planick, I will stop you there. I do not believe that Mr. Kobelarsek was a witness. So
I'm
your
sorry.
questions have to be.
So
limited
that would
to
have
who's
to
a
go to
witness.
Mr. Dutton as well.
Okay, to Mr. Dutton, what would you like to
The
ask?
containing of stormwater when there is a portion of the land that does go towards Mill Lane. How is that going to be contained? We've heard it this evening that it's going to all be contained and run the opposite direction.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yes, next question is who is responsible for keeping the pledge to keep the future right-of-way closed? Is that part of this development company that keeps that pledge? And could the city at any time request that that lane be opened? That's could also go to Mr. Dutton. On the density that Mr. Montgomery sent us, where he mentioned that R3 density would be higher, would the density formula for a planned development actually be higher? If they wanted to put more houses or more apartments onto this land that is currently slated?
Okay.
The construction traffic, it was just questioned to the city council, but this could go to Mr. Dutton as well. How does construction traffic plan to enter this land to do its work? Is it going to be using the future right-of-way off of Mount Lane?
Okay.
The point was made tonight by a couple of the witnesses that people would be moving out of their homes here in Worcester to move into these rental units, freeing up older houses. What type of study has shown that to be an actuality?
Is that question from Ms. Pierce?
No, I think that would be going to Mr. Montgomery.
He was not a witness either.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, Ms. Pearson. I know that that's fine. And I'd like the question answered by Mr. Dutton is what is being done to develop R1 neighborhoods in the city of Worcester? What's on the other, is there anything on the slated on the boards for future development of R1 neighborhoods? And what type of structure within the city itself is seeking other development sites so that the housing needs of the city can be met?
All right, so I think a lot of that is for Mr. Dutton. So Mr. Dutton, I'm going to turn to you and I'll go through these. So let's see. One of the first questions she asks is what requirements are not being met since this is a planned development? Do you have a response to that question?
So as a planned development, the developer is required to list all the sections which they request to deviate from the code. And they have done that in their requests. So there's 5 sections. It's in the packet there. So it's 1109.02. That's to allow the detached single family dwellings because they're not allowed in the base district. 111904B, which is to building facades. 1111.01C8, which is to the 50-foot setback around the site. Table 1115-2, which is the building separation reduced to 15 feet for some of the units. And 1117.02C, which has to do with construction in near wetlands.
Okay. All right, then next, we're going to move on. The next question was, how is stormwater containment being handled within this this plan development?
So we're in the preliminary development plan phase. So what they've shown on the plan is two large, I believe they're detention ponds, so I believe they're dry. So these will be utilized for stormwater. The exact method and numbers of how they're going to do that will be further down the road. They'll need to submit a detailed plan from a qualified engineer to our engineering division. They'll review it based on our standards and EPA standards, and the stormwater will comply, and that would apply to a site no matter what's being built here: single family, attached single family, commercial. Any type of development is subject to these regulations.
Okay. Moving on then, her next question is about the right of way. Do you know who would be responsible for keeping that closed, Mr. Dutton? Should we ask the developer?
That's likely a conversation down the road. It will certainly, it's shown on the plan, so it will be closed. The developer will work with our fire department to come up with a method for controlling access so they can have access and the public can't. If there are any changes to that down the road, it will need to be investigated by city council. So that's a right of way that I would assume that would be city council's purview, whether to let that open up again.
All right, thank you, Mr. Dutton. The next question that Ms. O'Planick had was whether the density for this plan development could be higher than what we're contemplating now. Is that possible?
So what they proposed was 141 units. So that's what the preliminary plan is showing. It cannot be deviate from the plan without a re-review of what's being submitted. And I will note that is lower than what's allowed in a standard R3 zoning district.
All right, thank you. Next was about construction traffic. Do we have any idea where that construction traffic will go? Do we have any way to regulate that?
That is also, part of our review by our engineering division. That will be, it's a couple steps in the future. That's not a consideration for a preliminary development plan. I would assume it would be off of Melrose. I don't know why they would have it come off Millen. That wouldn't really make any sense.
Okay, and we'll come back to the question from Ms. Pierce after you're done, Mr. Dutton. However, the next question was, what is being done in order to encourage or develop R1 homes within the city of Worcester, if you're aware?
We do have a couple of developments still building out. Crooked Creek had a phase approved a couple of years ago. They've put in the infrastructure on that. The reserve at Deer Creek, that's the Burbank Road, that's being built out. Our planning division and our economic development has put together some materials to outline all the prospective residential properties in the city of Worcester, and we've distributed that to area agencies and developers to try to get interest of properties in the city. We've also been in talks with developers on specific sites, but haven't had an application recently.
All right, thank you. And then let's see.
I think I also asked him about if he would explain the compatibility term.
Ms. O'Planick, if there's something I missed, we'll come back to you once we're done, okay? But we can go ahead with that. If you want to explain what you talked about earlier when you testified about compatibility for Ms. O'Planick again.
Yeah, and I think that was the first question there. In compatibility is, obviously a subjective term. What is compatible with something else? And in my opinion, a development with units that are attached to each other and detached to each other next to other developments with other detached single-family homes are compatible. The R1 district allows single-family detached. This development also includes that type of use as well as the attached single-family. There are also other uses in even R1 neighborhoods that are permitted conditionally, such as schools and churches and daycare, which I would I would think are much more intense than a single family home.
All right. And Mr. Malay, did you have an answer to one of Ms. O'Planik's questions?
I did. I had earlier described the property. I believe I have earlier described the property as being the plan having some compatibility. And what we mean by that is when we originally had the opportunity to meet with the applicant who was inquiring about how they may be able to make their project more harmonious with surrounding areas. We discussed, and as you see in the proposed plan, the provision of single-family unattached housing on the eastern side of the site as well as the northern side of the site. And the idea, and in addition to that, having a setback that would be just a little bit further than what would actually be required for a R1 property. I believe that the setbacks are a little shorter. If you are indeed an R1 property, you could be a little closer. That being said, the idea was that some of the concerns about the original plan was that if you are in an R1 neighborhood, looking outside of the neighborhood into this new neighborhood, that you would see apartments. And so the idea there was that if it's bordered with single family unattached housing, it very much carries a form of R1 appearances. And so that provides some compatibility by buffering the experience of those neighbors onto the east or north with the development. And then it becomes more dense in terms of having homes closer together, attached, as you go further west into the development, but away from the Mel Lane neighborhood in particular.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Malay. And then just for the final question from Ms. O'Planik, Ms. Pierce, she did raise the question of whether or not there are any studies showing that people currently living within the city of Worcester may move into these new homes, these new rental homes. Do you have any information that can help answer that question?
Well, I don't know of any studies, and admittedly, I think some of the families moving into the development would probably be moving into Worcester to fill some of the economic growth that some of the business partners had mentioned developing, this evening. Yet mainly what I was talking about was just the natural expectation of migration of, housing being opened up, stock being opened up, and then having the opportunity for some families to find those homes that would be affordable to them.
All right. Thank you so much, Ms. Pierce. Ms. O'Planik, I'm going to go back to you, but before we do, I just want to let you know that any follow-up questions you have to be related to the answers that were given. We already have spent quite some time, so I would urge you to be short. And you can only ask those questions to the three witnesses who answered your questions. So if you have follow-up questions to Mr. Dutton, Mr. Malay, or Ms. Pierce, please go ahead and give those to us now.
As far as the R1 and PD development comparison, do we have any information, when I talked to Mr. Dutton the other day, concerning the portion of the development that was not the high density 8-unit apartments? Is there anything in the plan?
Mr. Dutton, can you answer that question?
I'm afraid I don't understand the question. Can you?
There's nothing in the preliminary plan about the 8-unit apartments.
What about them, Ms. O'Planik?
As city council needs to make a decision on this preliminary plan.
Well, no, Ms. O'Planik, I will take that back. They do not tonight. They're only talking about zoning.
Okay,
so
all right. Got
guide.
it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So if you have no further questions, we're going to then move on. It looks like Mr. Griffith would like to talk.
Thank you.
So the same thing for Mr. Griffith. If you would like to go ahead and give us your testimony, we'll open it up for city council to question you, and then we will let you give questions to any witnesses in favor.
I appreciate that. I hope you can hear me.
We
I
can.
have, I apologize for the picture and the sound. I had to use a backup computer this evening to get on the Zoom. First of all, my first question would be to anybody that wants to answer it. John Ansel, perhaps. Did you guys get my earlier email about my?
Mr. Griffith, I'm going to stop you there. Mr. Ansel is not currently a witness in this hearing.
Who can I ask that you got my email? Because I'm not going to go over all those points again and waste everybody's time.
I know that we did get an email from you, Mr. Griffith.
Griffin with an N.
If you would like testimony to give testimony tonight, you can live. If not, if you want to rely on your email, you can do that as well.
No, I'd like to pursue a few things. First of all, I'd like to point out something. You have a left-wing snowflake liberal aligned with an evangelical conservative Republican, and we both oppose this piece of legislation. That's kind of I'm sorry, it's unusual.
It's called unity.
I don't know. So here we are. My questions really are more to the different people involved. First of all, a whole lot of work has gone into this, and I'm appreciative of everybody that's worked on this. And I would also, for those that may get upset with anything I say in my emails, I apologize in advance because there's a lot more smarter folks here in the room than me. But what I do want to go after here is a few things. One is that the bit about low-income housing and how this is going to help low-income housing. I know that world, and I'm not so sure that this is the answer to that. The answer is to develop low-income housing and land for that purpose. So, but I would like a little bit more. How is this going to benefit low-income housing? It's important. It's important to get affordable housing here. I don't disagree with that at all. I do disagree with putting this massive number of units next to this R1 development. And so my question also is, my other one would be of the Lemon developers that presented this. First of all, I like Lemon Development, and I think you've got a great rep, and I want you guys to know that from me. My question is that what is it? What's the return on investment? What do you have to make this thing work? Because do you have to go to 141 units to make this work? Can it work with 80? Because from our perspective, it's not a 7% reduction. We've gone from a proposal for 60 houses, which didn't fly, on the same acreage, to 141 units, and 141 people in rental units, and 141 families that are going to exit onto Melrose Drive every day to go to work to all these great jobs that are coming in. Now, sure, the city needs it, but do they need to have that traffic burden? And that's where I wonder, who did the traffic study that said that's going to be just fine? Because I can't see that being just fine. If you guys looked at the map, the one that's superimposed on top of the residential, not the one that's got our properties all kind of cut off. There's another map that superimposes this proposed development on the larger picture. You'll see that this is unlike anything in the city. So my question to Lemon, you guys have been sensitive to some of the issues. Can it fly with fewer? And so I'm led to the next question, which is, are we developing things? Worcester Economic Council, are we developing land for housing? When we start working on inviting businesses in, shouldn't housing and land for housing for the employees be part of Worcester growth? Shouldn't that be part of the consideration?
Who is that question for, Mr. Griffith?
Well, I think that question goes to whoever was representing the Wayne Economic, but anybody that feels like they can speak to that knowledgeably, I'd be happy to hear their response. I'm sure somebody out there is working on housing or land or something like that. Has to be. And if not, then my question to council is, and any of you can answer, why not? So there's the real piece for me, but there's a hero that's possible here as far as I'm concerned. And the hero that's possible is Worcester Brush. So here's the question I have. You guys just spent a whole lot of money developing an industrial park. Why can't some of that be devoted to the housing you're talking about? Reduce the
Now, I'm gonna stop you there, Mr. Griffith, mostly because
with an N.
we're getting far afield from zoning. Okay.
Well, okay, yes, perhaps. You're going to rezone this to a PD and put in R3 equivalent. And I'm saying to you that you've got an issue in the future coming down the road, and you've got an R3 opportunity just down the street. Why not combine the two, solve everybody's problem, and it all goes away? That's just a offering. What I really want to say is that 141 units rammed into this development next to us just doesn't look right. It smells bad. It doesn't pass the smell test for me. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Griffith. Does anyone?
Griffin with an N.
Oh, thank you. Are there any members of City Council have questions for Mr. Griffith based off his testimony? Mr. Ansel.
Yes, I would just like to make a comparative reference point as we're talking about compatibility in R3 adjacent immediately to R1. I happen to reside in Deer Creek, a R1 development with also patio homes, 0 lot lines in the front, approximately 140 homes in our subdivision, and immediately adjacent to our entry exit is a beautiful apartment complex called Scottish Highland, consisting of 130 units on 11.8 acres. And I exit and enter that my subdivision every morning, every night when I'm in town at lunchtime with no stoplight, uninterrupted. And the neighbors are absolutely endearing. And more importantly, we talk about the investment of the developer and the demand for those type of units. There's a waiting list, by the way. If you tried to go into the Scottish Highland tomorrow, you might have to wait 9 months to a year plus on a waiting list. Some garages attached, some detached garages, some apartments, to Ms. Warden's note, with no garages. It's beautiful. It's well maintained. The traffic was not impacted when they built that subdivision. No stoplight again. And their entry exit is immediately adjacent my entry exit. So half the parcel size, nearly the same amount of units, 130 versus 140, with no patio homes, no planned development. And I just want to put things in perspective because you know what? We have that in my backyard and it is unobtrusive, unproblematic, high demand for the city residents. And quite frankly, I love having them across the way right now because it is meeting a need for our community. And it's on a major thoroughfare, a lot busier than Smithville Western Road, as traffic studies can document. So that is just my summary in comparative reference. Twice the land value, the same amount of homes, a much more diverse offering because there are ownership, houses, condos, and apartments. I think it's beautiful.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ansel. And I do want to apologize to Mr. Griffin. I've been saying Griffith, so I do want to apologize for that. And also, I do believe that the questions that you raised, Mr. Griffin, that Mr. Millay has an answer for those questions. And Mr. Millay, if you could answer those questions for us, please.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Griffin. You had asked, and I apologize, but you had asked specifically when it comes to supporting new jobs in our community, what are we doing in order to help accommodate those housing needs? The city's role with that really is to share information, to provide supportive programs, to help encourage developers to be able to move forward with exploration of sites and being able to move forward with the ability to produce housing. And so with that regard, we do not, as a community, being a government and separate from free enterprise, we do not generally engage in the acquisition of property, nor do we engage in the development itself. We leave that to the private market because our experience has been that it works so much more efficiently that way. And going forward on that point, as far as how this particular project came into being on our end, our role really is a source for information. And we do strive on all development projects to be responsive, to provide what data metrics we do have. We work very hard as a team to also make sure that we operate quickly. And to that end, separate from this, but a little bit further downstream in the development process, we have what's called phased permitting and so forth that allows developers to move forward in a fast manner. So those are things that we work with to try to make development easy in our community for all companies that are taking a look to take private land and reimagine it. That said, we have codes and processes in place to make sure that when property is developed, that it's being done so in a manner that doesn't infringe upon the rights of others that could be impacted by that. And again, to that end, as I discussed a little bit earlier, there was some inquiry from the developer about how they could revise their plan to make that work in a manner that would be more, a manner that would work more harmoniously. Not necessarily perfect, but how could it work more harmoniously with the desires of neighboring properties?
Thank you so much, Mr. Millay. Mr. Griffin, do you have any follow-up questions from the answers you were given?
No, actually, Mr. Ansel, I'm appreciative of your perspective, very much so. Well shared and points well taken.
Thank you very much.
All right, now, if I could just ask for a raise of hands of anyone else who would like to speak against. Please raise them high so I can see them. Anyone else who'd like to speak against? Okay. Seeing no one, I'm going to go ahead and ask Mr. Montgomery. Well, actually, I need to ask before we do that, anyone who was speaking in favor who would like to ask a question of any of the witnesses who spoke against. If you'd like to, please raise your hand. All right, seeing none, I'm going to move on to Mr. Montgomery. Oh, we have, okay, Scott, what's your...
Real quick, and I do appreciate both Steve and Ann's comments this evening. But as I've been studying and looking at the plan development, and you guys know I've been up in your neighborhood and have been supportive of some of your concerns over the past year,
Right.
2 years, I guess. You keep in mind that on the north and south and east sides of your R1 development is land that is outside the city's control.
Right.
It's currently in the county, and quite literally anything could go there. So, we're looking at the R1 situation on the one particular property, but you do have some bordered properties that we have no control over, and you can get just about anything. So, maybe someday we'll be able to bring that into the city and provide zoning for that as well. But thank you again for both of all your hard work in the last 2 years or so that we've started this process, and I appreciate your comments tonight.
Thank you so much. Mr. Montgomery, if you could please read for us the questions and or comments from the public on YouTube.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Scavelli. The first comment is from Matt Delperpost. And he lists his address as 4676 Mel Lane. He asked that we not rezone the property to R1, to leave it as such. So I guess that's his question. I'll keep him in the loop. He comments a couple more times, not with questions, but simply commenting that he would like to keep the city attractive, enforce zoning laws, and zoning. So that, I believe, is the extent of Mr. Delpropo's comments and questions. The only other person who has commented is Val Williams. And I will read these. The first one, he addresses it to Mr. Dutton. It may or may not be Mr. Dutton. It might be Mr. Kowalarsik, but I'll read it. He says, how far ahead into city growth did the traffic impact study look, and did it include forthcoming Meyer, et cetera, and future developments using Smithville Western to Route 83? I can answer and say typically they would not include developments that far away, but I haven't read the actual report in that much detail. And if Roger's still here, maybe.
Yeah, Joe, I can answer that. No, the two intersections studied were Milltown Road and Melrose and Smithville Western and Melrose. Those were the only two intersections studied.
Do you know, Roger, how far in advance, or did it looked at the existing traffic and the proposed traffic for the proposed development on Melrose?
I think they went out 20 years, Joel.
Okay, so they did actually extend what typical traffic would be for 20 years, which would then include, a reasonable estimate to additional developments. Would that be a correct statement?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, so hopefully that answers that question. Val, again, it says business leaders. I think this may vary amongst the different business leaders. I do know Jonathan has some general answers for this. The percentages mentions of employees traveling from outside to work. Okay, this is just a comment. The percentages mentioned of employees traveling outside to work are similar to any city and most likely will remain the same. Jonathan, do you want to comment briefly on that?
I would say we're actually relatively unique as far as the county. This data is actually maintained by the census at the county level, and the data that we have is actually a little old. It'll be updated. We're hopeful with this new census when the figures come out in September. But in reality, 74.4% of Wayne County jobs are filled by Wayne County residents. So that's as of 2015, the last figure for when that was released. It actually came out in 16, so hopefully we'll get them again for this year. But going back 5 years, we were at 74.4% of all jobs in Wayne County were filled by a local resident. And what's unique about that is that that's an extremely high percentage when you're looking at the state averages. And the reason for that, it kind of plays into what we're looking at here, which is if you are looking to add a job into the Wayne County economy, that figure says that there's no one else locally to pull from. You have to reach out to other counties to gather your population, to gather your workforce. So for anyone who is today opening up a new job and they hire somebody from who lives here, most likely that person is either a student or they're coming from another job in the county. Otherwise, they're going to be pulling someone from outside of the county who works outside of the county into the county, and that's where this friction is arising. Is the fact that we are transitioning, and again, this is data that's 5 years old, and we've added many jobs since that period. But we're transitioning to what's called a commuter county, where most of your population who lives here commutes out. We're moving into more of an area where most of our workers may have to start coming in from outside in, which is something that you typically see with a Cuyahoga County, a Summit County. So that Richland County is in that same status. So we are at that threshold, and that's part of the reason why we see these pain points with housing.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. I will mention that in the chat, I did put a link in there to everybody that commented on the housing presentation and study that Jonathan and Andrew put together. We gave that to Planning Commission. We shared that with council members too. I think it answers some of those questions that people
Hey,
might-
Joel, Roger again. Yeah, I just looked at the traffic study and they did go to 2031 to build out of the developments.
Okay, thank you, Roger.
All right, yep.
There's only a couple more. Another one from Val Williams to someone at Lemon Development. The question is, there was a mention of economic considerations that would determine whether townhouses are built, and this leads to an exception and would lead to lower price multiple apartment rentals and higher density, question mark? I'm unable to paraphrase that, so as much as you can
Yeah,
interpret
Joel, I'm
that.
sorry, I'll struggle with an answer for that one. Yeah, again, we're here kind of looking at our zoning. When we get to if we get past or fortunate enough to get to the next stage, then that's obviously something we'll be considering and going through the proper resources. But yeah, I don't have much to add to that. Sorry.
Okay. I did miss one. Val just reminded me. He had a question about property tax, and what is the expected annual property tax? Is it graduated annually up to the maximum? So what is the schedule and maximum? I don't really understand the last half of that, but I can tell you, I mean, this is very, very rough guess. That property currently generates about $6,000 in annual property tax. And if you make a very rough estimate on the value of the units, that annual property tax could go anywhere from $240,000 to $300,000. Would that be correct, Jonathan?
It would be. That's based on comps in our area. That is assuming a valuation which is separate from the construction costs. Typically, for buildings like this, you will have a lower valuation than the actual cost of construction until the property would experience a sale.
Okay. That appears to be all of the questions in the chat.
Thank you so much, Mr. Montgomery. I believe that is everything. So based upon that, I would turn this back over to Mr. Sanders to close the public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Scavelli. And thank you all for participating in this. This has been very informative. Hopefully, everyone's had a feeling that they've had an opportunity to hear their concerns. And at this point, for the sake of brevity, I will close this public hearing.
Okay, we will have considered that we've had a public hearing on the Melrose rezoning. Thank you for all who participated, and I'm sure there's a lot of food for thought that was generated. We have no unfinished business, so that brings us to new business under item 7. The first ordinance will be, or piece of legislation is ordinance 2021-18. It'll be presented by Mr. Sanders. It's slated for 3 readings. Mr. Paulo, would you please read the title?
Ordinance number 2021-18. An ordinance amending Part 11 zoning of the codified ordinances of the city of Wooster, Ohio, so as to amend the zoning map at a certain parcel on Melrose Drive.
Mr. Sanders, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before I get into, before we discuss this at any additional length, I do have a question for the gentleman at Lemon Development. And am curious as to, is this, in terms of looking at moving this legislation forward, is this something that's time sensitive for you gentlemen? Or if we wait 2 weeks, is that going to create any issues for you?
Mr. Sanders, no, wait 2 weeks is not going to create any issues for us.
Okay, thank you very much. At this point, with that statement, I have no intentions of moving this forward this evening. I guess I would, I don't guess, I would like to open this up to council for any council members that wish to have any maybe additional conversation beyond what we've just listened to. And with that, Mr. Silvestri, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Sanders. And I want to thank everybody who participated in that public hearing. I think the designated Mr. Scavelli, I think you did a fantastic job. And I want to thank everyone who testified both for and against during the public hearing. But I did want to follow up. I really wanted to keep the public hearing for the public, and I wanted to reserve some of my comments and questions for this time. And I wondered if anyone from Lemon Development, I know Patrick Mackey, you spoke, if you could address this. I had gone through all the information provided both to council and then what had come before Planning Commission. I appreciate council being privy to all that data. And of the 118 rental, 23 single family units, it wasn't clear to me. I know there was a housing association. I appreciate the fact that because of the housing association, the access to the Meadow Lane neighborhood will allow no public through traffic. It's going to be emergency access only, and I was happy to see that. I want to thank you for that. But understanding the housing association, it wasn't clear to me where the home ownership and the rental kind of line was. These residential unattached units, is the land owned and the unit rented? Is it both? Could you explain that for us, please, Patrick?
Yes, sir. Right now, as we currently have it modeled, it's all rental.
Okay, it's all rental. So apparently there can still be a housing, it said HOA, is that homeowners association?
Yes, sir.
I guess maybe it was a matter of semantics. I was just confused as to why the acronym HOA was used, homeowners association, if there's really no home ownership.
I think part of it was is we haven't made the final determination on if it's going to be all rental or if it's going to be a component of both.
Okay, because it was pretty detailed in terms of the master association and the sub association. So anyway, I just had some of those concerns, but I appreciated the fact that that was the vehicle used to make the development private and to kind of allow that line and the lack of public use to the adjoining neighborhood. So thank you for that. I guess after reviewing all of the information, all of the data referencing our 2015 study that showed a serious need for housing, and I know Jonathan Millay has underscored that. I think Andrew Dutton would reflect that. I think our Director of Administration, Joel Montgomery, would attest to that as well as probably all of our city team, and not to leave the mayor out, but I wanted to speak to that. We can handle demand for up to 120 multifamily residential rental units in the next 5 years. The angst I have with this proposal is that it really reflects us trying to take care of the lion's share of that need with this one proposal. So I appreciate the extra buffering. I appreciate the concessions, the 7% reduction in density, the 28 single family homes around the perimeter. I appreciate all of that. I just feel that the plan provided is really excessive in terms of density. And I just want to speak to that. So that's really my comment. Again, thank you for everyone who spoke against in the neighborhood. I'm familiar with and know most of you. Thank you to Andrew Dix of the WEDC, Tom Marting of Gojo, Tim Swift of the Wooster Brush Company, Kevin Weldy of Tech4, and then most of all the Lemon Development folks for being with us tonight. But that is all I have for now. And again, thank you for everyone that put time into the plan.
Is there anyone else, any council members that have any other comments they wish to share this evening? With that, Mr. President, we will say that this legislation has had first reading.
Okay, so noted. I'm sure that will be reflected in the minutes prepared by Mr. Paulo, that we've had a first reading ordinance 2021-18. Now we'll turn our attention to resolution number 2021-20. It'll be presented by Mr. Silvestri. It is a budgeted item, will not require 3 readings. Does require me to ask Mr. Paulo to please read the title.
Resolution number 2021-20. A resolution authorizing the Director of Administration to advertise for bids and enter into a contract with the lowest and best bidder for the placement of sanitary sewer and water lines and allowing for immediate enactment.
Okay, Mr. Silvestri, the floor is yours, sir.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. As you know, with the city's recent purchase of the 5L farm, and we recently turned that over to the Wooster Growth Corporation, we have pledged that we would provide utilities to entities on this piece of property. And this project involves the placement of about 1,100 linear feet of 12-inch ductile iron water line, 4 fire hydrants, 1,200 linear feet of 12-inch PVC sanitary sewer line, and 5 sanitary sewer manholes. I appreciate our city engineer being proactive and extending these utilities for future growth at the 5L farm property. Again, thank you, Roger, for having your staff do all of the design, construction, administration, and inspection. It saves the taxpayers significant resources having your staff do that. As the president said, this does not require suspension of the rules. So with that introduction, I would move for adoption, Mr. President.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Silvestri. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by, is that Ms. Warden?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm
Have a
still
frog
trying
in
to
my throat
figure
or
out. I'm trying to figure out where everyone is. When everyone left the meeting, everyone's position changed. It was so okay. So second by Ms. Warden. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, would you please call the roll on the motion to adopt?
Cavan,
Yes.
Warden,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Sanders,
Yes.
Silvestri,
Yes.
Bostancic,
Yes.
Ansel.
Yes.
Resolution number 2021-20 passes. Next item is resolution number 2021-21. It'll be presented by Mr. Silvestri. It also is budgeted, will not require 3 readings. Mr. Paulo, would you please read the title?
A resolution authorizing the Director of Administration to advertise for bids and enter into a contract with the lowest and best bidder for the placement of sanitary sewer main on Stibb Street and allowing for immediate enactment.
Mr. Silvestri, I turn the floor over to you again.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. So this is a request to authorize the advertisement for bids and to enter into a contract for the placement of a sanitary sewer main on Stibbs Street. So what we want to do is we want to be proactive, and I commend our city engineer again for being proactive and preventing possible sanitary sewer backups in the future because of shared laterals, and we all know what a risk those are, especially when there's an undersized sewer conduit. So we're taking that undersized conduit and we're replacing it with a main. So it's going to involve the placement of approximately 450 linear feet of 8-inch PVC sanitary sewer pipe, also 6 inches of sanitary PVC sanitary sewer lateral pipe, and 3 sanitary manholes. Again, thank you, Roger, for doing all of the design, construction, admin, and inspection in-house through your staff.
Do you have a motion for us, Mr. Sylvester?
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for adoption.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Sylvester. Is there a second?
Second.
I thought I heard Mr. Cavan first,
Mhm.
but hey, my hearing's suspect, I admit it, but we'll grant Mr. Cavan as seconded. Any further discussion?
Mr. Kobrolarczyk, I just wanted to know, is this project going to run the entire length of Stibbs, or is it just a section?
Just a section of it,
And what are the boundaries?
450 feet of it. I think it's between Gashi and Belmont.
Thank you.
Yeah, don't quote me on that, though. I haven't seen the plans.
Well, that's about 50 yards from my front porch. So
Oh,
thank you.
take pictures.
I don't think you need to recuse yourself, Ms. Ford.
Seeing nothing else, Mr. Paulo, would you please call the roll?
Bastancik,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Sanders,
Yes.
Silvestri,
Yes.
Warden,
Yes.
Ansel,
Yes.
and Cavan.
Yes.
Resolution number 2021-21 passes, and I just want to say, whenever I see Stibbs, I remember that was one of the buses that when we had a bus route that had the Stibbs bus. So that's some of us old timers can remember. Probably the mayor. I'm not sure if anyone else is as old as the mayor or not. So anyways, that's a little bit of history and dates me. Now we look at resolution number 2120-22. Again, will be presented by Mr. Silvestri. Once again, it is budgeted, does not require suspension of the rules. Mr. Paulo, once again, would you please read the title?
Resolution number 2021-22. A resolution authorizing the Director of Administration to advertise for bids and enter into a contract with the lowest and best bidder for the placement of a storm sewer on Cleveland Road and allowing for immediate enactment.
Take it away, Mr. Silvestri.
Thank you. We got the unaesthetic but necessary business out of the way, and the subterranean work continues. But in this particular case, if you've been like me, you've gone down Cleveland Road at the site under discussion here, the intersection of Cleveland Road and School Court, which must have been so named for the school that used to be at the end of the court. But you've gone down there, and after a heavy rain, I've been really struck by the amount of standing water that has pooled or ponded right there along the edge of the roadway. And when vehicles go by, it is enough to get any pedestrians on the sidewalk soaking wet. So I had thought about that, but Roger, I want you to know there are things that I have observed and I have not called you right away. So thank you so much for taking care of this issue. This is to enter into a contract and place storm sewer right in that area on Cleveland Road. It involves 460 linear feet of 12-inch storm sewer pipe. It includes 4 catch basins and 3 storm manholes. It's being proactive, and it should reduce this flooding that I just described. This section of Cleveland Road is scheduled to be resurfaced next year in 2022. So we're doing this in anticipation of that project as well. And again, thank you, Roger, for doing all of the design, construction, administration, and inspection work out of you in your office. With that, I move for adoption, Mr. President.
Okay, motion to adopt by Mr. Silvestri. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Myers.
Second by Mr. Myers. Any further discussion?
Well, simply that if we're splashing pedestrians and things, can we charge for it like a spray grounds kind of a thing?
I had a question. I mean, a little more specific on where that area is. I know there is some flooding on Cleveland Road. I've seen it.
It's right just north of where the drive going into Dunkin' Donuts is, the old First Federal Building.
Yes, yes.
North, go north to the light. It's right there.
I have seen it. That's the area that came to mind when you said that, but I wanted to be clear. Thank you.
Yep, yep.
Seeing nothing further, Mr. Paulo, would you please call the roll on the motion to adopt?
Myers,
Yes.
Sanders,
Yes.
Silvestri,
Yes.
Warden,
Yes.
Ansel,
Yes.
Cavan,
Yes.
and Bastancik.
Yes.
Resolution number 2021-22 passes. Okay, the next resolution is 2021-23. It'll be presented by Mr. Ansel. This one is slated for 3 readings. Before I get to Mr. Ansel, I'll turn to Mr. Paulo again and ask her to please read the title.
Resolution number 2021-23. A resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a territory transfer agreement with the Wooster City School District and the Green Local School District to support revenue uniformity and allowing for immediate enactment.
Mr. Ansel, the floor is yours, sir.
Revenue uniformity. What a unique concept. This is a very interesting and uniquely effective piece of legislation before us this evening, founded on creativity and thinking outside of the box to reach a mutually beneficial outcome for 2 key educational districts. I want to compliment and acknowledge the collaborative approach of Mr. Dean Frank, the superintendent of Green Local School District, and their Board of Education, as well as Dr. Michael Tefts, the superintendent of Worcester City School, and their Board of Education. After a lot of diligence and several months of research and collaboration, both the Green Local School District and the Worcester City School Districts have made an agreement to partner to bring revenue sharing or uniformity to the city's existing approximate 74 or 75 acres of property in the Wooster Innovation Park. As we're all aware, that was split with the annexation and the bring into the city and the ultimate acquisition between competing school districts. Well, there's several ways to overcome that. One being more singular in filing with the state to, in essence, bring that property wholly and exclusively into the Worcester City School District, and or a more of a collaborative approach and partnership between the districts in lieu of proceeding with the uncertain and multi-year legally convoluted process of territory transfer by petition. That's winner takes all. It can be egregious and emotional and problematic. And when objective parties and educated minds meet and work together to accomplish a joint and a mutual sharing of the tax revenues associated with the industrial development, truly is unique, different, and provides an effective resolution for all parties involved. So that's the concept. The city has to have our approval to allow this to be finalized and the process completed in lieu of going to a state petitioning process. So overall, it's a win-win. It's a collaborative and long-term partnership. And you know what? It's just the fair and right thing to do. And it's nice that everyone can consent to this and agree to this and work toward an effective resolution. I would, let Jonathan make any highlights or closing comments, but I'm fully prepared tonight, and I hope that we all can support this to move this, first of all, to endorse the resolution and the outcome of this potentially emotional issue, and to validate and commend the respective school boards and their leadership teams for working to achieve this final goal. So Jonathan, your input, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ansel. I believe you hit all the high points there. We would just add that, as you mentioned before, it's been a very long process. The city specifically, the only thing that's changing for us is that we will provide a courtesy notice to our partners in Green Local School District. And when we look for any special arrangement for tax incentive as may be needed, as we're targeting the site for economic development in the future. So we're appreciative that the districts have divined a plan that can allow things to work forward and to also allow things to speed up, because otherwise, while there are other processes, it's a winner takes all option. It's very uncertain, and it's a very long process to go through. So that being said, it's a great thing to see this opportunity come together, that our districts were able to develop this. And that being said, the only item that we would have is council's consideration this evening to move forward on this this evening, as our partner school districts would look to examine this at their upcoming meeting next Monday and next Tuesday, the 26th and the 27th. Happy to answer any questions, but thank you very much.
Johnson?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a great, I agree with everything everybody said on this. It's a great piece of legislation, but I do have a quick question. I noticed you said that we are noticed, and it says so in the document, we are lawfully required to contact Green School local districts if there's a tax abatement being offered. Do they have any say in whether or not it would get passed, the school board and Green local schools?
The agreement is fully, for us, Worcester City School District will have full rights and privileges. And if we were ever to exceed the level that we go above, the 75% state minimum thresholds, at that point, Green Local School District wants to know. And at that juncture, it's still Worcester City School District's decision, but they are asking for the courtesy of being notified, because with the arrangement, it does impact their finances as well. They would have to know and prepare, although usually, as we work here, all the news is typically very good that we're working to create things that didn't exist before. So that's the hope going forward here.
Okay, thank you. So just a courtesy, but only if we go above a certain point in the.
It's a courtesy in any event. So lawfully, when we're looking for tax treatment, we have to notify the school district that the property is located in. In this instance, since the arrangement involves some sharing of revenues between the districts, any tax treatment results in a change to the balance sheet for either district, and Green Local wants the courtesy notice of that from us.
The Green Local would not have any say in the decision then, whether or not.
No, once you go above statutory minimums, there are some details that they may be able to work out with our Worcester City School District partners. but it does not have an impact on our interactions with Worcester City School District. And we can follow that whole scope of the law, which allows us up to 15 years at 100%, which is not something that we've entertained before, but it's something that the law does permit. In any event, though, the only thing that we are obligating ourselves to is letting them know that that occurred. And from that standpoint, once we do that, our obligations are solved, and we talk specifically with the Worcester City School District at that point.
Okay, thank you.
And to your point, Councilman Bostancic, we still have authorization to approve anything beyond the minimum CRA offering. So if they would come in at a higher level, council could review that and refuse, 100-year, 15-year abatement. So we really control the level of CRA as it relates to future expansion on those parcels. Kind of a quid pro quo, but just a very good question, though, and a very good point. Mr. Cap.
Again, Mr. Bostancic, I think I and you would both view a negative response from Green Local Schools. We would consider that as part of our decision-making process. If it was something they had, we notified them, and Jonathan came back and said that they were against it. I think myself for sure, and I think other council members would respect that opinion, even though they don't legally have a vote per se. We certainly would consider that as part of the argument for or against.
Right, I would agree.
Mr. Cabin.
Yes, I had a question for Jonathan. What is the revenue percentage for each? Is it an equal split?
No.
75-25?
No, it's a hold harmless for Green Local School District. Green Local has other revenue sources, including income tax, for people who reside there, not employed there. So it's a little different from us. So their millage, their rate of taxation is considerably lower than Worcester City School District. So what'll happen here is the property moves into Worcester City School District. The Worcester City School District would compensate Green Local for their millage and then keep the remainder. And that equates today, that equates to about 35%, approaching 40%. We would expect that to grow over the years, just looking at how millages have been trending. But that is something that's going to vary a little bit from each year, and the school districts are going to have to take just a little bit of time to calculate that amongst themselves. But they felt at the end of the day, this provides something that is predictable. It's an option that allows this site to develop quickly, and it also allows for a uniform tax rate for the whole site. So that's beneficial to us as a community. And in addition to that, it's essentially creating additional revenues then for the Worcester City School District without taking anything away from what Green Local would experience if it never transferred.
Right. It sounds like a good deal for us, a great deal for them. All right. Because there's no buy-in whatsoever. It was an empty field when they had possession.
I would add that we continue to have other areas in our community that we work with Green Local School District on, and this is something that's examined. One of the concerns that we have, of course, is having an area that is we're marketing a site. There's an equal defendable tax rate. So this provides us with that. But as we would continue to grow, it provides us assurances that there wouldn't be hard feelings on either side. So the school districts, again, have been working with this for quite some time, trying to figure out what really was the best path forward for each one of them. And this was the deal that they came up with. And so for our purposes, we're able to maximize the value of this land for the benefit of our community. It's going to benefit 2 districts. So we're on that front, we're not allowing an opportunity to support our schools to go to waste with it.
And Mark, to your point, Mark, the nice thing about this is the validation of Worcester City Schools. They perceive this as being reasonable, fair, and equitable. And that was a huge endorsement in terms of the negotiating process. Smithville or Green Local will receive a smaller portion of their millage. Worcester will get the, above par value, and everyone feels it's fair and reasonable. If the Worcester City Schools would have objected to that, I think we would have had another situation to deal with. So that validation is very, that's a very affirmative validation.
Yeah, sure.
I have a question. Is there a sunset provision for this?
No, not to my knowledge, no.
Hasn't it been in the past, and the law might have changed, that when we annexed things, there was like a 10-year period where the township would get their revenues, and then after that, 100% would revert back to the community.
So that process exists for the townships with conformity, and that's a separate process. Oddly, I don't quite understand it. I need brighter minds to explain it to me, but our school districts, dating back to the Northwest Ordinance, we always had districts set up to support our communities. As our communities grow and our boundaries change, for whatever reason, we have a very archaic structure when it comes to the territory of school districts, which is how our city today has 3 different partners when it comes to school districts. So those are generally very inflexible. They move really, from what we understand, only by 2 mechanisms, by agreement, which is what we have before us here. That seems to be the more common method. And then more rarely, there's what's called the territory petition by owner, which is what we utilize to start the process. That is very seldom used, and that's part of the reason for all the convoluted processes that we would end up going through with that. So it's really interesting. And again, that these boundaries tend not to move. So it's actually really kind of special that we do have an agreement here that both districts have come together on to say, yeah, we'll make an agreement and move this, because it doesn't happen very often, from what we're told from the education experts.
All right, thank you.
Because there's only one Wayne County, Jonathan. We work together.
It worked here.
Yes. Well, that being noted, thank you for your discussion. I would motion to suspend the rules this evening and move ordinance 2021-19 to 3rd and final reading.
All right, Mr. Ansel has moved to suspend the rules. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Myers.
Second by Mr. Myers. Mr. Paulo, would you please call the roll on the suspension of the rules?
Sanders,
Yes.
Silvestri,
Yes.
Warden,
Yes.
Ansel,
Yes.
Cavan,
Yes.
Bostancic,
Yes.
and Myers.
Yes.
The rules are suspended. Mr. Ansel, I look to you again.
Motion to adopt, Mr. President.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Ansel. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr.
Oh.
Silvestri.
Who is that?
I'll stand it. Or was it?
I was
saw
asking
Mr.
who seconded the motion.
Line show up before.
I think we got on top of each other there.
Showed up simultaneously.
Yeah.
Control this meeting, Mr. President.
What?
Got out of hand.
Actually, could you just end it anytime soon?
And I don't even have to separate you two because, we're, miles apart doing this virtually.
To
So,
move their boxes.
On my screen, John's right there.
yeah. So anyways, I gave it to Mr. Silvestri for the second. So
Okay.
that being said, any further discussion? Seeing none, then would you please call the roll on the motion to adopt?
Sanders,
Yes.
Silvestri,
Yes.
Warden,
Yes.
Ansel,
Yes.
Cavan,
Yes.
Bostancic,
Yes.
and Myers.
Yes.
All right, resolution number 2021-23 passes, and it seems to be a very judicious resolution to what could have been a sticky wicket, as they would say in the British Isles. Brings us to our last piece of legislation. It's, resolution number 2021-24, presented by Ms. Warden. It's scheduled for 3 readings. Before I get to you, Ms. Warden, I'll have Ms. DiPaolo read the title. That public hearing lasted further than my water went, so I apologize there. So, Ms. DiPaolo, if you would, please.
Well, are you guys sure you don't want to have like an executive session or anything yet this evening, just to, for fun? No? Okay.
Well, I will
How about
highlight.
sticking
Lynn.
it?
Mr. Scavelli, would you please put her on permanent mute?
Hey, Lynn, I will highlight, the president didn't allow me to give my committee report, of which I have 2 pages of redlined items, as you will see. So hold on to your
We can
hat.
let-
at the end.
We can let you
At the
have
end, John.
Mark, look at all those redline notes.
I think you should recap the 43-page PowerPoint from the finance update.
Bob did a very good
You'll be
job. I
the
commend
last
the
to
mayor. Continue.
Ooh, I'm out of water too.
speak in miscellaneous, and you will probably be the last on the screen because everyone will have drifted away.
All right, I'll get on it now.
I will note that Scott Boys is the only remaining trooper that's just hanging in tonight. But thank
He's a
you-
marathoner.
Thank you for listening, Mr. Boyce.
All right, resolution number 2021-24. A resolution authorizing the chief executive officer and the chairperson of the Board of Governors of the Worcester Community Hospital to enter into a contract with Frontline Holdings.
Two.
Thank you. LLC for the purchase of land, appropriating the necessary funds and allowing for immediate enactment.
Well, I digress a little bit. If I recall, Mr. Boyes at one time was a school board member of Green Local Schools, so maybe that's why he's still here. So he can report back to him as to who they have to watch out for, Worcester City
As
Council.
a longest board member, I appreciate cooperation.
Yeah.
And Mr. Ansel, wasn't your partner, Kevin, also a school board member? So you probably-
Absolutely, he was.
Yep. All right, Ms. Warden, the floor is yours. It is slated for 3 readings, but you can suspend the rules, and it looks like they want immediate enactment.
Please
But
don't
the
make-
discretion is
3 more
yours.
times.
It's your piece of legislation.
Anything else? I mean, Scott, did you need to talk any longer? Do you want to just stay here all night, or shall we continue?
I am fine unless council has questions, so I'm happy to answer, but I appreciated you guys allowing me an executive session the last meeting, and I appreciate you suspending the rules if you would.
Thank you, Mr. Boyce. That was, I was going to mention that I didn't reach out to you prior because you gave such a thorough explanation in our executive session, and also the packet in our agenda this evening contained a lot of helpful info. So with that being said, Worcester Community Hospital seeks to purchase 2 parcels of land, the first being 1.437 acres That is currently the location of Pizza Hut, the second being 0.982, which is the former location of, this will date me here, but what once was Blockbuster Video. And more recently, I believe it was like a payday loan office or something. Both properties are owned by the same party and are tentatively agreed to sell to the hospital for a sum of $1 million. The land will be used for future hospital development and continued expansion. Funds for the purchase were not included in the hospital's 2021 budget, thus the need for this resolution. Should council pass this measure, the money will be appropriated pursuant to section 10.03 of the city charter and will derive from Fund number 504, which is also known as the Hospital Plant Fund. An additional $100,000 will be appropriated by the passage of this resolution and is slated to be used to pay any closing cost fees and expenses related to the purchase. The deal will add an additional 2.419 acres of land to Worcester Hospital's main campus, and given its proximity to the current facility, it's a very logical move toward their expansion. As evidenced by a long list of regional, state, national, and international accolades, our hospital has a stellar reputation in the medical and local communities. They've successfully self-financed numerous expansions, and this project will be no different. And so in order to expedite the process, I move to place this resolution on third and final reading this evening.
I second that.
Ms. Warden has moved to suspend the rules. Is there a second?
Second that. Mr.
Second by Mr. Cavan. Ms. DiPaolo, would you please call the roll on the suspension of the rules?
Silvestri,
Yes.
Warden,
Yes.
Ansel,
Yes.
Cavan,
Yes.
Bostancic,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
and Sanders.
Yes.
The rules have been suspended. Ms. Warden, I look to you again.
Thank you. I move to adopt the resolution.
Motion to adopt by Ms. Warden. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Myers. Any further discussion?
I had a question.
Go ahead, Mr. Cavan.
I had a question for Mr. Boyes. I fully agree. I think it's a very good move. It's just a natural progression of the hospital toward Bell Avenue as the front. The only remaining piece would be the Taco Bell location. Would you keep that drive directly adjacent to the hospital open for the public to use that to get back? And is there any liability with that? Because that is it would be an island. It would be a standalone entity. Maybe Mr. Scavelli could answer that. I'm not sure.
I can answer on the liability issue. What's going to happen is that will be a separately leased parcel, and I think that they know that if there's any, that we would be interested if that was ever to be a possibility. But right now that will remain a separate parcel. It'll continue to operate as Taco Bell. We will be negotiating easements in order to continue its operation. And anything that occurs on that property would not be the liability of the city. So does that answer your
Mr. Scavelli, though, I mean, obviously, we're going to have to give an easement to come into the hospital property to get to it. I mean, it will be landlocked. There's no access.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So we will be negotiating the easements necessary to continue its operation. That's actually part of the purchase agreement that we have negotiated.
Okay, we have to do that.
We do.
Okay.
It would be, it's not really within the, it's not really something that you can really do realistically to landlocked property.
Right.
If we do that, I doubt they would be entering into this agreement. You'll see Taco Bell as a viable tenant at this point.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Did that answer your question, Mr. Cavan?
I believe so. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So those who are worried about where they're going to get their Taco Bell, they'll be all right. As to the where they're going to get their Pizza Hut pizza, we have no idea. So anyways, brilliant move. This was, I think, part of the long-term strategy, and it will just enhance the hospital's position in for the next 25 years.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I just want to ask one question while, if I may. I know that the agreement purchase price was $1 million. Even in section 1 of the legislation, it says $1,100,000. And then it reiterates in section 2, the $1 million purchase price. I presume that's for closing costs and any other fees. I guess it just seemed kind of high to me. I think typically, I know for construction projects and other types of things, the city puts in a 10% contingency. That just seemed high for closing costs. Do we have any estimate, a more detailed estimate, Mr. Boyes, of what we think that might look like?
We don't have a more detailed estimate other than when we had the closing of the College Hill Shopping Plaza, which was significantly less than that. I think Mr. Doherty had recommended the 100,000 so that we wouldn't need to have to come back to council in case we hit that barrier. But I fully expect to be well within that, and certainly our intent's not to spend more money to close this deal than we need to. We were going to put up a toll booth to charge Mr. Myers to access Taco Bell, so we could recoup some of the, since he went off camera, I thought I would, but there he is.
I like the way you're thinking, Mr. Boyes.
You'd have to cross the
Hey,
border.
it's my son who needs access to the Taco Bell. he goes, evidently they are open for breakfast, which I did not know. But we could charge for that as well as the spray grounds on Cleveland Road. Andre.
David, I did say to John Scavelli, I said, hey, why don't we just add 10% the purchase price for any contingencies or closing costs, knowing that Scott is very frugal and would spend as least amount as possible. But I don't want to have to come back to council for $5,000. So anyway,
understood.
That's the rationale. Thank you.
I rest at ease knowing that spray grounds and toll booths are not seriously part of that. Thank you.
We have two incredibly qualified finance people involved in this with Andre and Scott. I think we're in good hands.
Speaking of which, seeing nothing else, Ms. DiPaolo, would you please call the roll on the motion to adopt before we all get too punchy?
Silvestri,
Yes.
Warden,
Yes.
Ansel,
Yes.
Cavan,
Yes.
Stanzik,
Yes.
Myers, Sanders.
Yes.
Resolution number 2021-24 passes, and once again, a very wise move. Appreciate it, Mr. Boyes, hanging here to the bitter end. We'll write you a note so you can tell Bill that you could sleep in late tomorrow.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Vikendijk. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it, Mr. Cavelli and the mayor.
Yeah. All right, let's start with Mr. Sanders since he started off the night.
Well, I have nothing to add. Thank you.
Please recap the public hearing.
All right, Mr. Myers.
No, we're done. Thank you.
Mr. Silvestri.
I just want to thank everyone who spoke. We had a lot of good input, a lot of good exchange, and thank you for all those that worked hard to provide information prior to this meeting. I really appreciate the administration and their diligence. So thanks again and good night.
Ms. Warden.
I have nothing to add. Thank you.
Mr. Cavan.
No, nothing to add. Thank you. Good night.
Mr. Bostancic.
I don't think there's any more to say.
And Mr. Ansel, you can give us a recap on the committee meeting next week.
I just want to compliment the administration, Andre, Joel, and the entire operating team within the city of Worcester. It's remarkable rebound, as Bob highlighted. We are rebounding back strong. And, to have revenues 4% over budget and expenses 3.5% below budget with drop through to the general fund 8% favorable out of the blocks first quarter, commendable. All the other positives in the operational review were enlightening and very well presented. And again, we're just very, very fortunate and blessed to have the performance and the achievements and the contributions that we have within our operating units and within our finance structure. And to have a rainy day fund, in excess of 215 days does give us breathing room. So let's maintain that positive momentum, and I will motion to adjourn this session this evening.
Motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Myers. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Good night, everyone.
Night, one
Good
and
night.
all.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night, Mr. Mayor.
All right.